Hey guys, Captain Nostalgia here for Victims and Villains, and I am super excited to be sharing this interview with you guys. I had a chance to sit down with writer-director Steve Kostanski to talk about his brand new movie, Psycho-Goremen, which already being a couple weeks into 2021 has already kind of set the bar for one of my favorite films of this year. I know it's super early to make that claim, but it is such a great movie. Go check it out. It is in theaters, video on demand, and digital beginning January 22nd, 2021. And I actually got so hyped up about this interview that I actually completely forgot to ask Steve a mental health question regarding his brand new movie. And so I'm just going to put this bumper right up at front. If you guys are brand new to Victims and Villains, we are a nonprofit podcast and an entertainment site that educates and engages individuals on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. So we create content that want to just let you know simply that you have value and that you have worth, and that if you or someone you know is struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, suicide yields 132 successful suicides each and every day on American soil. And when you look at international numbers, you'll find 800,000 suicides occur every year. So please, if you or someone you know is struggling, we encourage you guys to reach out. Links are going to be in the show notes for wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Please stay with us. And now, my interview with Steve.
How you doing tonight, Steven?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I am well. I just want to jump into it. I have to say, I feel like this feels like very premature to say this, but Psycho-Goremen could ultimately be one of my favorite films of 2021.
Oh, geez. That is high praise. Thank you.
Yeah, man. I was working on the review today and for our website, and I just have to say it's such a interesting movie to look at, both from a visual standpoint, but also a structural standpoint. And one of the things that we had talked about recently on our podcast has been kind of the downcline of family entertainment. And it's interesting because when you look at how Psycho-Goremen is structured, it feels like a throwback to the 80s movies of The Goonies and Little Monsters and Gremlins and these movies that are family appropriate, but also have this darker edge. And there are moments littered throughout the course of this movie where I think the two weapons in its arsenal that struck me the most were its use of comedy and gore. And I'm just kind of wondering if you could talk about the tone, first off, of Psycho-Goremen, and just kind of how you decided to kind of like I said, it feels very 80s infused.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's very much influenced by the movies I grew up on. But for this movie specifically, it's the movies that I watched I was maybe a little too young to watch. That freaked me out, and I think that trauma ended up being an inspiration, for my creativity growing up, and I feel like I'm always going back to those same movies because they had such a profound effect on me. Purely because I felt like my childhood brain had trouble, connecting. Say, for example, a movie like Terminator 2. As a kid, it's I love robots and lasers, but I don't know if I like that cop getting impaled through the head or the security guard getting his knees blown out. I think that juxtaposition of fun genre imagery with brutal real life violence was a thing that really affected me as a kid, and I wanted to translate into this film. I wanted it to have a tone that straddled the line between fun and uplifting and like dark and horrifying, and just always jumping back and forth between the two at the weirdest possible moments. I guess, yeah, just being weird is always like the main through line for this film. Like anytime, like entering situations with certain characters where I could take a total left turn, just to see kind of what would happen. That was always like my priority. And I guess a bit of that is a vibe that comes through in some of my other films as well, is like, it always feels like I'm making, on one level, I'm making like a standard genre movie that has all the tropes and the arc of that type of movie, like the emotional, like instinctual arc of the movie is intact, but then hanging off of that is me, like, twisting things and messing with things. It's almost like I'm watching that standard movie with you and going like, yeah, but now this is going to happen, and now this is going to change. Like, as a way of like emulating growing up and watching movies with my friends and like talking shit while we're watching movies and like being like, well, wouldn't it be crazy if this happened instead? Like that's such a like fun part of growing up, and I don't feel like there's enough movies like especially genre movies nowadays. Like there aren't enough movies that I want to do that along to, and I feel like PG is a movie that's trying to capture that spirit a little bit, that like fun genre spirit that like takes lots of weird twists and turns, but also, while being weird and crazy, also delivers like core emotional requirements of this kind of movie, which in a way I feel like is a subversion in itself, because everyone is so, I feel like genre cinema is so cynical nowadays that it's always all about not giving that payoff, because I feel there's an attitude that that's like somehow cheap and an easy out when it really isn't, like having an emotional payoff to your movie. So yeah, it's like straddling the line of like delivering on expectations and then completely twisting and messing with expectations.
I think that was one of the things that had surprised me the most about this movie, was how heartfelt it ended up being by the end, and how there's like no character that's ever really wasted in this movie. And I think it kind of like feels timeless in that era, because when you go back, and I feel like no matter how old you get, you can show a movie like Gremlins to the next generation that's coming up and like still have them find something enjoyable about it. And that's kind of how I feel PG handles itself. And one of the things that I feel like really kind of helps that is the unpredictability of this movie, where when we first get into it, like the first like 20 minutes or so are just like straight horror, straight sci-fi. Like it's like, okay, this is going to be like a weird movie, I'm not sure what I'm in for. And then you meet Mimi, and it's like there's like this just instant shift into like comedy. And the first interaction between her and PG is some of my favorite moments in the film. And I'm curious how, like, when you were writing the movie, how intentional was it for you to have that moment of comedy be between those two characters initially?
Well, I think, like, the core and the heart of the movie is the relationship between Mimi and PG. And so, like, when I had locked that down in my head, I felt like the movie really fell into place, because I knew I always wanted PG to, like, be this evil, all-encompassing, like, monster, like, overlord man that's, like, hell-bent on conquering the universe. But he is constantly being undercut by this little kid that is just full of attitude in the way that I feel like kids normally are. Like, kids at a certain age really think that like the whole world revolves around them and their logic and how they approach the world. It's like a kid before like self-doubt and any kind of like self-reflexivity starts to sink in, and it's just they're in their own fantasy world. And I wanted to draw that parallel between PG and Mimi and really play off of it as much as possible, because I feel like as different as they are visually and on the surface, like they're very much the same character. PG is the overlord of the universe, and Mimi is the overlord of Spengler Springs, Manitoba. Like, she is like just this tiny terror that, everyone serves and like bends to her will because she's such a little tyrant. And I wanted that parallel to always be present between her and always have them battling. And so that first scene when like I did not like cut down that sequence. Like I wanted to live in it for a while. It's a pretty long scene because it really like sets up dynamic, and I wanted to show like I wanted to spend enough time setting up that Mimi would not take any of PG's shit. Like regardless have the power that she had over him, she would still give him attitude. And I really want to like believe that with her, so I want to take my time building her up to that moment, and then having them square off. And that's really where the movie like I think that's like where the plot kicks in, because really the whole movie, the heart of the movie is that relationship is between Mimi and PG.
Now, I know I'm running out of time, so I have to ask. There's a game that is that's integral to the plot of this movie, and it's been a couple of weeks since I've seen the movie, but I want to say it's called Crazy Ball, and I probably should have rewatched the movie. But how did you come up with like what was the creative process of like actually creating the rules of that game particularly? Because it just kind of seems like it's all over the place, and I want to see like a director's cut where we get to like see like a full blown round of that game.
Well, the funny thing is that there's a point in the middle of the movie where Mimi's explained to PG, and in the original cut, it's played in sequence, and it's actually just her explaining the rules. And I realized like that's not the joke. The joke is that like PG doesn't understand what's going on, and the audience shouldn't understand. So I'm constantly like trying to like scale back on how much information is getting. So that's why that scene is just a montage of like lines overlapping. So you're getting overwhelmed with the number of rules. Because the game itself is actually pretty simple. Like if you read the rules in sequence, you'd be like, oh, okay, that's all I got to do. But because it's presented in such a like nonsensical way, it's confusing. But it was something that I knew if I just like totally bullshitted the rules and like made stuff up as the plot needed it, it wouldn't like it would feel like that. Whereas I wanted it to feel like a game that actually works, and we're just not getting a proper explanation of how it works. So technically the explanation is there. I've just overlapped it so much that you can't actually make sense of it. But the game itself is like actually surprisingly straightforward, because I felt like for purely to help my actors, like I wanted them to at least get the basics of this nonsense game that I made up. Because I felt like it would have, if like Nita and Owen, who played Mimi and Luke, like if they didn't get it, like I was worried that the audience would feel that they didn't get it. So I wanted something that at least made a baseline of sense for them to understand as they're playing it. So yeah, that's how Crazy Ball worked on set. Is that there's basic rules, but I just really muddled them in the editing, so you don't really understand what's going on.
Well, I'm hoping that like the Blu-ray will come out with like a feature where like you can play it and learn the rules of it, because it sounded and looked pretty awesome. I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of living vicariously through those kids during those moments, especially.
Well, it's the kind of thing that we all had that game as a kid. I feel like we all would play games that we just kind of made up and made our own bullshit too, and so I wanted to emulate that as much as possible. So that's like, I don't know, an important part of childhood I don't feel like I see enough in media. I think the closest thing is Calvin Ball in Calvin and Hobbes, that comic strip, which is definitely what these all the reference to. But yeah, I do feel like it's a very like based on real life experience kind of game of just kids making up their crazy nonsense in backyard.
I mean, I know I definitely had a couple games like that with my sister growing up, so I feel that.
Right.
I think, and I don't know how if you'll take offense to this or not, but one of my favorite things about this movie is the costume design, and particularly I think the first image I saw of Psycho-Goreman was him in the cowboy getup, and
it's not even a cowboy getup; it's actually a reference to Sam Neill's character in Jurassic Park.
Funny. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I feel like that also, like, people ask the timeline of this movie, like when did it take place, so I feel like that sets it somewhere in the early to mid-90s, having a Jurassic Park reference like that. I mean, they never overtly say it in the movie, but that was things for that look, that PG has.
That's awesome, and we kind of get to, like, understand a little bit of, like, Psycho-Goreman's like backstory throughout the film as it goes, and we meet this like round table of villains. I won't like give too much away, but like their design kind of looks like Power Rangers like villains a little bit, and I don't know if that was like intentional, but that was really nostalgic for me because I grew up in that era, and so like
definitely Power Rangers. Power Rangers or any kind of Super Sentai show from Japan, like Kamen Rider. I just feel like the style of feature design, like very, very much specific to Japanese TV and movies. That I don't know. I don't feel like anybody tries to emulate it enough. Like the same way nobody makes like kaiju movies, like Godzilla movies with guys with creature suits stepping on miniature buildings. Like I want to try and like emulate sort of that flavor, because like everyone's preoccupied with realism. I wanted to make things that like, yeah, maybe those like faces don't move super great. Like just their look, their static look has a lot of personality, and I wanted to make creatures that felt like they were taken from toys or cartoons. Like I wanted the feeling of like somebody had to translate a look of a simpler design into something in real life, because I'm a big fan of like the Masters of the Universe movie where they had to do that, and I just like that design process of trying to figure out like how do I make this color cartoon character like kind of look intimidating, and just kind of like the weird decisions that come with that. So I tried to instill all the creatures with a little bit of that kind of vibe.